I'm Michael Laine. I'm the president of Liftport Group. I am guest hosting for the Unknown Quantity today. So folks that have been watching for a little while will know that this show is hosted by or sponsored by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. Tom Olson usually runs this show and is a pretty active and engaged host. But he's unavailable today. 2 weeks ago, he had surgery, so he's doing fine. Everything's great. And then today he is traveling, so not available. So I'm going to cover his duties for the day. Thanks everybody for being a part of this. Surprisingly, we had a lot of activity on the last show. So for the folks that are new and joining for the first time, we really appreciate y'all. Thank you. When a former NASA administrator gives you, a heart symbol on LinkedIn, it tends to spread the word pretty nicely. So for those that are new because of that, thanks very much, y'all. We appreciate your attention. Today's show is going to really focus on heavy lift, but we're going to take kind of a meandering route to get there. I don't think anybody that's paying attention to this show doesn't know that SpaceX has been doing some pretty remarkable stuff. I hate to use the phrase engineering miracle in a sentence because those two things don't normally go together, but it is pretty remarkable what they have accomplished, and we're going to dig into this a little bit. But we are going to take a little bit of a circuitous route to get there. So before we jump into that stuff, I want to talk a little bit more about the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. I'm on the board. I've been on the board for several years. I think it's a great program, and I'm going to post a link to their site. They are mostly known for their business plan competitions. They've been running them for off and on most of a decade, and with some pretty remarkable results. Let me post this here in the chat. They've given away hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think it's $400,000. They've had some pretty remarkable companies go through their business plan competition. And so we're going to try and get some of those folks on this show. It's really kind of an honor for us in our world, right? They go through and they come through our course, and they are vetted. Our process is pretty straightforward. We get a certain amount of submissions. We review them. We whittle them down to 6 or 8, and then they go head to head. We call it Sharks in Space, giving a nod to other larger business plan competitions, meaning television. What we do is we review these businesses, the business plans. We have an expert panel review them and evaluate them and say, okay, these 6, these 8, they could go head to head. We bring them into a location, usually have a 2 or 3 day boot camp prior to the competition. And the companies that come in on day 1 are very different by the time they leave on day 2 or 3. And then they go in front of judges, and it's almost a knife fight on stage about who is going to win that money. And sometimes it's $2,500, sometimes it's $10,000, sometimes it's $50,000, sometimes it's $100,000. It really depends on who our sponsors are. And so thank you to all of our sponsors who have kept this thing running and going. It's really been an honor to have carefully, thoughtfully spent your money on these new space startups. And some of these space startups are pretty remarkable. They have done some remarkable things with their funds and have been quite successful. So hats off to y'all. We're changing our formatting a little bit. So we host this show twice a month. So every other week, we're going to focus one of those weeks on companies receiving the money. So that would be that would be the micro grant people. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And it's going to be, hey, Jonathan, thanks for joining. It's going to be the folks that receive the money for the micro grant awards, and also the folks in the industry that receive, multi-million-dollar investments from venture capital or the government. So we're going to do that once a month. And the other time of the month, we're going to talk to the folks that are actually writing those checks. So that's super exciting. What are the VCs, the angels, the government organizations looking for when they make these, $5, $10, $100 million investments into these companies? What are they looking for? So that's really going to be the kind of shape of our show as we end out this year and roll into the new year. So that's going to be a format change. We're really excited about that. I'm involved with building the CRM for how we corral guests and speakers, and it's a pretty remarkable list. So we're excited about that. The other side of it is the micro grants. We had Jeffrey Ensner on the show last week. So thanks a lot, buddy. Appreciate that. His company was one of the winners of our micro grants. So what is that, you ask? That's $1,000. We're giving $1,000 to small space startups, and that's really exciting. It's no strings attached obligation. They can do whatever they like with it. What they do is they fill out our form, go through our process, and we review it. We stack rank it against the other competitors that month. And the company that we think is the most deserving, has the most to gain, is doing something compelling with the money. That's what we do. And so this is now our third month, and that's been going well. We're pretty happy about that. Jeffrey from last 2 weeks ago sent me a really, really cool example of what he did with that $1,000. And his quote to me was, "Money well spent." So thanks, y'all. We appreciate that. And I know what he's doing, but it doesn't seem fair for me to talk about it. So I'm not going to share that. But it's cool. It's really good stuff. Hey, Chris, nice to see you. Appreciate that. So this micro fund, our goal is to give out $1,000 every month. We'd love to have your support on that. So if you are so inclined, please click the QR code or the link here for the micro fund, and you'll find a donation space for that. All right, that's enough of that stuff. Let's go ahead and get into it. So we'll have a winner on our next show. We're not going to announce it yet, but we do have some entries, and we're evaluating them now. So, and that's going to be our normal sequence. Once a month, we're going to showcase the microfund folks with investors that are writing checks. And then once a month, sorry, I said that backwards. Once a month, it's going to be about the people receiving the money. So the microfund folks and companies that are funded. And then once a month, it's going to be about the folks that write the checks. So this is really about the commercialization of space, and we'd love to have you all participate. All right. So today is going to be a news roundup, but a news roundup with a focus. So I'm going to, as you all know, I'm going to jump through a lot of hoops pretty quickly. So just kind of bear with me. This show's got an arc to it. So just stick with me. We're going to start with this article from Jeff Faust. Now, I've known Jeff for a really long time. He's a super smart guy. Dr. Faust is, I'll share the link and then I'll post it. Dr. Faust has been writing about space for a really long time. I think I met him in 2001, maybe 2002. He has his own site, the Space Review. He also is a writer for several other magazines, space magazines. Space News, I think, is the largest. So there's been a lot of talk about a commercial lunar economy. So this article just came out, and it's a pretty good article. It says that there's some hope on the horizon, but maybe people are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, right? So intuitive machines, their revenues are going up. They see a validating upward trajectory, says the CEO. All right, that's fine and that's cool, and we're happy with that. But this, right? It's a lunar chimera. The Center for Strategic and International Studies has a much more sobering perspective. I posted that article here. Let me bring that up. I may come back to that in a second. But this article is kind of worrying, right? These are smart folks. It's a think tank out in DC. I know several of the folks that are there. And it basically says, you can download the report here. It basically says, there ain't no there. And I'm sorry if I sound a little cheesy about this, but the gist of it is, going back to the Space Review report, how do you count the missions and book them? It doesn't make sense to count a memory disk, a very small thumb drive, at the same level as Artemis 3. So there's a lot of distorted storytelling out there, is his claim. 40 significant missions. All right, that's pretty interesting. But some of them aren't going to make it. Israel's mission is not funded yet. This, right? There's no indication of a lunar gold rush because there are no strong revenue-generating businesses centered around cislunar activities anchored by commercial customers. One of the people I'll talk about more later, Michael Mealing, is a founding partner of Starbridge Capital, and they're a funding group for space. His constant line is, who is your customer's customer, right? So there's a lot of people swapping money that is ultimately government money. That's the source. But what he keeps asking is, where is that next downstream customer? Where is their money coming from? And it's a really valid question. So there's a bunch of stuff that is aiming for the moon, but this line is something we should all be paying attention to. No strong revenue-generating businesses centered around cislunar activity anchored by commercial customers. Now, there's a lot more to this report, and I do encourage you to take a look at it. We don't have time. We're not going to dig into the meat of it. It's a little sobering. The other thing I want to point out is Dr. McDonald. We've had him on the show, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago in a different show, but still us. Dr. McDonald is recently retired from NASA. I don't think he's the chief economist anymore. I think he retired maybe a few months ago. But he's talking about, well, we keep talking about asteroid mining and we're not any closer. So this is definitely a downer report. PricewaterhouseCoopers also has a report. They definitely are a little bit more bullish. So I'd like to know what the difference is between these two documents. That document is here. Let me point a link to it. It's pretty long and it's much more bullish, but it's also based on 3-year-old data, and a lot has happened since then. So does that make it not useful? No, I don't think that's correct. But it does beg the question of where's the money coming from? And you could really say that it is governments. At the end of the day, the money is coming from governments. I don't like that answer, but I can't come up with anything that refutes that answer. Now, that might be second or tertiary level or primary level government funding, but so far, there hasn't been a compelling reason financially to go to the moon. Now, I say that as a guy who wants to build an elevator on the moon because I believe there's value there. I believe that if we get there, we can build something quite amazing. But I also am very aware that there's U.S. and international interests in this that are at stake, and if we get there, then we win. So I really do think that this article and this report, these two reports read together with the analysis of the space review makes for a really interesting afternoon reading. You take those three pieces together, and then we're going to add a fourth one. Let me get to it. You add a fourth one, which is from Bryce. Bryce is a think tank, also in DC. Really focuses on space. So the Bryce report is particularly interesting because, by the way, you can download this. Download the infographic. I have this infographic on my monitor. This is my infographic for my machine right now because I just like seeing this stuff out there in front of me. So they spent a little bit of time about, okay, what is a cislunar space and the moon, etc., near rectolunar halo orbits, like what's the activity there? And then they dig into this piece, and that's where I want y'all to pay attention to. Who's going, the customers, the companies, what they're looking for, and they broke them down. So I think this is really interesting. You would almost think that this belies the two reports I just referenced, but I think it actually supports the two reports I just referenced, right? That if you dig into most of these companies, I'm going to drill in here well, I wanted to get that drilled in and see well, I can't. If you drill into each of these companies and figure out where is their money coming from, most of them, I don't think I can point out an exception. Most of them, the money is coming from a government. Not always the same government, but a government. That is their client. So it's going to be amazing when these companies start working with each other to become clients, now a notable exception, of course, would be launch and landing. So I'm going to ignore that. But when the utility companies start making clients of the maintenance and servicing companies, and those two have clients in lunar rovers, that's when you have a cislunar econosphere. That's when you have a lunar economy. And that is beginning to happen, but going back to this report, it ain't going to be easy. Swimming upstream is the way that they describe it. So none of this is supposed to be bad news. I think it's just really a reality check for where we are right now. And I do find it interesting that PricewaterhouseCoopers was definitely more optimistic 3 years ago than the think tank, the Center for Strategic International Studies, is today. So I don't know if that's just a change in market. I don't think that it is. I think it's just the reality of space is hard, engineering is hard, money is the lubricant that makes it all happen, and ultimately the money comes from a government source right now. We're trying to move it, we're trying to change that, but that's where we are today. So with that, all a little bit somber, a little bit sober. I'm going to cut these links. Just a moment, a little housekeeping here, and we're going to switch gears to something that maybe is a little bit more positive. So, given that that's what's happening on the moon and towards the moon, what does that mean? What does that mean to us, right? What does that mean to us now today in the commercial space sector? So the same group, Bryce, came out with a new report, brand new as of a few hours ago. So let's dig into that for a second. Same story. They really smart organization with smart people there, doing good analysis. Oh, Chris is asking about Wi-Fi on the moon. Yeah, I talked about that a little bit 2 weeks ago, that some really big players are starting to develop laser communications, optical communications, and that's the only really good way of getting Wi-Fi on the moon. Concurrent to that, some classmates of mine at Volta at International Space University are creating a hub for space-based solar power for lunar development. So I would definitely watch that space. I think there's some really intriguing things happening there. I'm happy to make some connections and some introductions if you're interested. Okay, back to this. So Bryce has got this report, and I'm going to break it down. There's some text and there's some other stuff. So again, this is new as of a few hours ago. I was really impressed by it. Look, it's taken since 1957 till now to get to 10,000 satellites. And we're about to move into that era to get even more satellites. So we're going to have another 10,000 in the next few years. And we might have another 10,000 even sooner than that. So this is really kind of implying 30,000 satellites, maybe 25,000 satellites, very short term, which is going to have a role in launch capacity. And now this is specifically heavy lift, which I thought was interesting. So we just got, oh, I don't know if I posted that link. Give me a second. We just got notified this week. Let me find it. Well, somewhere in my notes, SpaceX hit 400 launches, and I was going to post a link, but apparently I am not. Here it is. Okay. Here we go. This article is really focusing on heavy launch, but clearly the workhorse of the global space industry is this Falcon 9. So pretty remarkable. Nice job, folks. Pretty happy that has been such a success. But we're moving towards this era of having a crazy amount of satellites. It's one of the reasons I backed away from working on the Earth's space elevator. Was I just lost confidence in that technology being available if you have 10 or 20 or 30,000 satellites. Chris, a local VC in the Seattle region, is talking about 60 to 100,000 satellites by the end of the decade. Redmond, Washington is probably going to produce at least half of them. That's a real statistic. Redmond and this region is the satellite capital of the world, bar none. And that's a pretty exciting place to be, right? That's an ecosystem that's really remarkable. So you got this report where we're talking about heavy launch is going to be a big major player, but then you've also got lots of satellites going up, lots of rocketry going up, and the workhorse of the Falcon 9. So then let's kind of dig into some of the numbers that Bryce is coming up with. Number of spacecraft. It's a giant number, right? And now they're breaking it up into Starship only versus, sorry, I said that wrong. Starlink, SpaceX's internal money-producing ATM that just spits out cash forever, and everything else. I actually thought that number was higher. It's actually, to me, really encouraging to see other satellites coming online faster than I thought that they were. So that's pretty neat. So here you've got 3,000 a year for the next 4 years. So let's just round that to 10,000. Let's just, there's going to be some stuff that doesn't happen, but we got 10,000 up there now. We've got 10,000 going up right now. And these, by the way, I'm assuming, I'm going to rely on the credentials at Rice, but I'm assuming that these are funded and manifested missions. And then by this graph, it looks like it drops. My hunch is what this means is that most of the missions are in place and operating, and that there's stuff that's kind of follow on, supporting, or replacement. But this implies that this is going to drop, and I don't think that's true. I think that's an artifact of Bryce's reporting of funded and manifested missions, and that there's going to be things that follow on. So I don't want people to be discouraged by this drop. I think it's just an artifact of Bryce's reporting system. So we have 10,000 up there now. We're going to have another 10 or 15,000 during this time period. We're going to have another 10,000 during this period. That to me is 30,000 by itself. And like I say, funded and manifested. So we're going to have a lot of launches. I I don't really have a lot to say about launches, actually. Other than it's super exciting, it's kind of fun to watch. And I'm not going to go into, this rocket's better than that rocket. I really, really expect Blue Origin to come online and surprise a lot of people. Their motto of Gradatum Ferociter, I think, has hurt them in some ways, but their engineering is terrific, and I really can't wait to see it come to fruition. So that's about to launch. They're days, weeks away from launching, and then Relativity. I don't have a lot of confidence in ULA as an organization. I'm sorry, but while they were a workhorse for a long time, I think they've been surpassed by the market. I don't have a lot of confidence in Europe and Japan building competitor systems to the Americans for a while. They're trying. Don't get me wrong. They're definitely trying. China recently announced 2 different rockets that have the capabilities of landing. So think SpaceX and Blue circa 2005, 2006 era. So that technology is proven. Japan is working on it. India is working on it. They've had successes. So this array of launch is going to change. And honestly, I don't think we really have a good handle on what 2029 to 2033 look like. And we're going to talk more about why I don't think we can see that. Okay, that's all I want to talk about on this graphic. Let me close that out. Okay. Switching gears here for a second. So let's dig into stats for a second. I'm kind of a nerd about stuff like that. So is this one it? Nope. Nope. Oh, I'm really about to be disappointed. I may have closed the link early. Here we go. Okay. So this is a site I was watching for a long time, and it was one of my favorite sites to just peruse during the early days of the pandemic. And they went offline. Where'd it go? Yeah, they went offline, and they weren't updating it, and I was really disappointed in that because it was exciting to watch this stuff develop. So let's dig into this for a second. So this is just a hobby site. I don't even know who does it. Don't know anything about them. Don't know their qualifications, but they track SpaceX. That's their whole raison d'etre. This is the manifest, what's coming up, where it's launching, a little bit about it. It's all Falcon 9 almost. What's that phrase? Turtles all the way down. This is Falcons all the way down. There's a Starship manifested for all the way out to 2028, which I find pretty hilarious. So they get a lot of their data from a bunch of public sources. I wouldn't think about the stuff that's way far down, but I would pay attention to what's happening, here. Now, I think some of their dates are all confusing, so I would ignore that. But this stuff is real. So what are they tracking? I ignore some of their more fluffy stuff, going to Mars, going to the Dear Moon program. I've been paying attention to this. This stat to me is remarkable. So, launching. All right. So last year they had a publicly stated goal of 100 launches, and look at this, 98, including 2 failures. I do wonder. I don't remember what those failures were. I kind of suspect they have a different metric for failures, but 98. Their publicly stated goal of 100 didn't quite make it, and now just one month later, they're looking at 136. That's bonkers, and it's the end of November. It still implies that there's 18 left that are planned. Is that right? I really don't know if that's correct or not. So again, still questioning the source here, but these folks have been reliable for a long time, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But that would be 18 launches in the next 30 days, implies every 2 days, every 3 days for launch. That's a pretty fast cadence even for SpaceX. So, but they have 115 under their belt so far this year. So hats off to those folks. And then, well, no, I want to look at this section a little bit more. You know, we talked about Falcon 9 as the workhorse, and their success rate. 100% success rate in Falcon Heavy, and a 98.97 success rate, 99% success rate for Falcon 9. So nice job, folks. Good job. So pretty happy to see this stuff. I hope they continue flying with this level of cadence, progression, and expertise. And going back to the chart that we had earlier, I'd like to see the other companies increasing their capabilities as well, right? I clicked off the graphic, so we can't easily go back to reference it. But what if all of those companies? I think there are about 12 of them. No, sorry, there weren't that many. There are about 12 rockets. There's about 8 companies, 8 organizations. What if they all had a 99% success rate and were also flying 115 times a year, right? There's been a lot of talk about not making investments into space launch companies for a while, and that's mostly been true. But nations are going to protect their launch capabilities, national launch capabilities. So whether it's India as ISRO or India supporting commercial companies within its borders, that's definitely going to happen. So SpaceX is currently eating everybody's launch and lunch, but that's not going to stay true. Japan will have their own launch capabilities. China will have their own launch capabilities. They're not going to give that up. So I do wonder what happens next in this industry. Okay, we're going to move on from there. Okay. Closing that. Well, I'm not really sure if that closed because I was an idiot or if yeah, I'm not sure if that show closed or if I am broadcasting or not. That is ridiculous. I'm very angry at myself right now. Okay, well, let's continue on and see what we got. I'm still going to close out the show in 18 minutes. So, okay, I don't know if we have an audience or not. Fingers crossed. I'm going to just keep going. God. All right. Oh, hi. Thanks. I apparently I was closing out my screens to get some stuff out of my way, and apparently I hit the button. So I'm an idiot. Sorry about that. Can you just tell me if we're still live on LinkedIn or not? Because we've lost our audience. Okay. I'm just gonna keep going with the next 15 minutes, and hopefully you can splice this together and I don't look like an idiot. So fingers crossed. Sorry, Leah. Okay, so the things I wanted to talk about are, let's drill into a concept that I co-invented a few years ago called the Starship Singularity. And we've talked about that at other times. Let me share that link. Thank you, Leah. So, during one of the business plan competitions that we hosted for the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, partnered with the Foundation for the Future to host some business plan competitions online. It was all virtual during the lockdown. Nobody was traveling as much. And so the Center for Space Commerce and Finance continued hosting their business plan competitions. And as part of that, they had some investor panels. And Michael Mealing, I mentioned him earlier as one of the co-founders of Starbridge Capital, was talking about the idea that there weren't any business plans specifically focused on the capabilities that were announced for Starship. And what does that mean? And why isn't anybody doing that? And given SpaceX's track record, if they say they're going to have 100 tons to orbit, then they're going to have 100 tons to orbit. So why isn't anybody building plans around that? And that's when I came up with the phrase, the Starship Singularity, that it implies that the future is so murky beyond a certain point that it is impossible to correctly make guesses, make predictions based on that new future. That technology is so transformative that any guesses about it are probably wrong, which is what I was talking about earlier when the Bryce report was talking about 2028 to or 2029 to 2033. And I said that that's too murky. We don't have really good insights into that. So the idea of the Starship Singularity started gaining a little bit of popularity. Fast forward, my friend Peter Garrettson, who is part of what's this thing called? It's a think tank out in DC, the American Foreign Policy Council. So he's a former retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, was a very, very strong vocal advocate of the creation of Space Force. He really was intrigued by this idea of the Starship Singularity. So the links for downloading it are here, and you can grab it yourself here. It's a pretty interesting document. It really focuses on on, pardon me, it really focuses on some of the military elements of it and what it can do, what it can't do, pricing for access to orbit, what reusability really gives you. Uh, I like this phrase, not just the moon, but access to all rocky bodies. So that's really exciting, right? Because we all know that Musk wants to go to Mars, but also NASA just announced yesterday that SpaceX is going to Saturn. So, by the way, that's an interesting aside. As far as I know, this is SpaceX's first other planetary mission. Maybe I'm wrong about that because I haven't tracked that as closely. But I think this is SpaceX's first non-Earth, non-orbit, non-moon mission. So out into the larger solar system. I think this is great because this, to me, this says we're ready to go farther, and I'm excited about that. But coming back to the Starship Singularity, this is a system that is being built to be a workhorse system in terms of mass. You could launch the equivalent mass of the International Space Station in 3 days. That's using Musk's original, we're going to launch 3 times a day, 1,000 times a year. This is how much the space station this is how much the space station weighs. You could put the whole thing, assemble it in a weekend of just a few launches, and have the equivalent of something that took 20 years and many billions of dollars to construct. So there's definitely a national security element to this. This is bonkers, right? Massed orbit. Let's scroll into this because this is a great graphic. International Space Station at 450 metric tons. This is what I'm saying about you could do it in a weekend. Space-based solar power. That's going to be a lot, but it's all doable, right? So this document's really interesting because it implies a future, and it tries to get a grip on what this future is going to look like. I maintain that that's really hard to do, and that's why it's called a singularity. But this concept came out of Dr. Werner Vinge's paper, The Technological Singularity, which, by the way, is 30 years old, a fascinating read and very, very accurate about artificial intelligence. So definitely worth taking a look at that. All right. So given that I think the future is very murky based on this new technology, where does that lead us? And I think it leads us here. Let me post a link. It's almost a cliffhanger, isn't it? Ha ha ha. I think it leads us here. So look at the date of this. January 2022, SpaceX wins $100 million for point-to-point space transportation. Okay, I have not heard a word about this in the last 2 years. Okay, I feel like this is something that should be regularly reported on. I have a lot of confidence in Sandra Irwin. She was very good at her job. But why is this kind of dropped off the conversation list right now? I was really perplexed by that, which led me to this brand new article, also also Sandra Irwin. Let me post that link. They're talking about, sees promise in the rocket initiative. That's cool, as cargo, right? I think everybody watching this program understands what point-to-point delivery means. It means launch from Boca Chica. This just happened a few days ago, right? Launch from Boca Chica, Gulf of Mexico, land in the Indian Ocean near Australia 57 minutes later. That literally happened a week ago. A 57-minute land in the Indian Ocean mission. So that really gives weight to the idea of point-to-point cargo delivery. Now, I am a former U.S. Marine. I want Space Marines to happen. I would love to have a bunch of, a company or even a platoon, if necessary, of jarheads just standing around waiting at Boca Chica for a mission, because I think that is really exciting. But here's a thing that people are not really talking about. If we believe that there are going to be copycat companies that emulate or surpass SpaceX capabilities, then we don't have a limitation on rocketry. We don't have a limitation on launch. We have a limitation on where you can launch and where you can land. So that bottleneck is going to restrict the point-to-point delivery elements. And I think that's a really big deal that no one's really talking about. A good friend and a former intern of mine, Tom Murata, has a small company building what's effectively ship-based launch systems, launch platforms. And I think he's got a really interesting idea that is going to be the future, right? Seattle, Portland, Sacramento, work all your way down to San Diego, all the big cities on the way down to San Diego. None of them have viable spaceports. All of them have large ports. So to incorporate a launch district within a large port, that is going to be a game-changing, a world-changing technology. And that's why I'm convinced that the Starship Singularity is real, that we really, really cannot predict what happens when Starship comes online. And then the final the final article I'm going to talk about is, let's see. The final article is just from this last week. Again, Sandra Irwin, so she's really terrific. General Saltzman, front and center, right there. Sorry, front and center. So, President-elect Trump, Ted Cruz, and General Saltzman. We've had General Saltzman on some of our shows. It was about 3 years ago. Terrific guy, super great spokesman for Space Force. He was then, quote, only a 3-star general. He is now the chief of space operations at Space Force. So he is the highest level 4-star general at Space Force. And they're talking about point-to-point suborbital capabilities, right? Leveraging the capabilities in the future. So, all of these things tied together of maybe the moon is a little bit fluffy. Maybe we have, too high an expectation. I'm going to stop sharing now. Maybe we have too high an expectation for the cislunar economy, but rocketry, heavy lift and normal lift. It's funny how we can now say normal lift, right? Before, even just 10 years ago, rocketry was still super, super hard and rare and exciting. I'm not saying it's not hard now, and it certainly is still exciting, but it's not the same level of challenge. We've mastered it as a global species. We've mastered that. So now we've got this situation where massive launch is capable. This new technology of massive reusability is coming online. Other companies and other countries are emulating that. Point to point suborbital becomes potentially real if you've got a place to launch and land from. And there's now developments of places to launch and land from. So all of those things all work together. And I think, using my crystal ball, I think that puts us back into the driver's seat for a lunar economy. Because if you have that much rocketry, then it's much easier. The risks for going to the moon, the risks for developing a lunar econosphere, a cislunar econosphere, are way, way less. So we might be a little ahead of the curve. We might have the cart a little bit ahead of the horse for now, but I do think that this is have to kind of Tory and stake the business that you're in. So anyway, I hope that was interesting. Hats off to the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. I really love those guys and what they're doing for the industry. They are not currently funding projects yet. That's not their business, but they're certainly trying to advocate for and be a catalyst for this new space economy. Okay, with that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sorry about the technical difficulties that I caused when I clicked the wrong button. So that was mildly embarrassing. Sorry about that. Thanks to everybody for being a part of the show tonight. Please tell your friends. It was really great. Last week we had a semi-viral moment where we got a whole lot more watchers than we normally do, with some pretty notable people, including former NASA administrators. So it's really nice to have that level of support. Counting that one, we've had about 8 very senior people at NASA on our shows. Lots of military folks, senior level military folks, scientists, researchers. And it's been really nice to see that level of support throughout this. Now, the Unknown Quantity is a relatively new show that is sponsored by and run by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. I just happen to be filling in because Tom was traveling. But I appreciate everybody for being here and a part of it. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, we will have the new winner of the next micro grant. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.